Start with the first speaker, and the first speaker is Patrick Breyer. Actually, he's the only speaker who cannot be here in person, but we do have an online connection with him. Now let me see if I can bring that up. Maybe I need help from Myron. Here it is. Maybe we can make this full screen. Yes. Good morning, Patrick. Can you
Good morning.
Yes, we can hear you. Excellent. Patrick Breyer is a member of the European Parliament, and he represents the Pirate Party. And he is working on issues including indiscriminate messaging, chat control, European digital identity, European space for health data, and privacy in electronic communications, e-privacy. So we're very happy to have you here to speak on AI-based surveillance. Is Europe turning into a high-tech surveillance state? The floor is yours.
Thank you very much for having me and, in fact, for organizing this important conference. I've chosen the title AI-based surveillance. Is Europe turning into a high-tech surveillance state? Because we have technologies in our hands nowadays that would make it possible technologically to do so. And we can see in China how it can play out. We can see in Russia to what extent they are going. Authoritarian regimes love what they call AI, which is really machine learning. And let's run through the ways in which it poses risks to our society. But I'll also go into the effectiveness of these kinds of surveillance. And what we've discussed most recently in the European Parliament was the AI Act, which was supposed to make sure that artificial intelligence is used in line with our values and rights. But in fact, in my opinion, it is a failure when it comes to the use of AI by the government, because it is lenient. It doesn't prohibit any of the dystopian technologies that we can think of, except for things like social scoring, for which there are no plans to deploy them in Europe anyway. So one of the technologies that are not excluded is face surveillance, what they call remote biometric identification, but I think it's better called face surveillance. As you know, the idea is to identify suspects of certain crimes, or else, potential terrorists and people endangering public security. First question is, does it work? I haven't heard of any terrorists being apprehended in countries where it's being used. But on the other hand, experiments in Germany by the German police have shown that at the accuracy rates which they promote, which are 99% and more, still in practical use, if you use this in public spaces, and that's the idea, it's being used on thousands and tens of thousands of citizens every day, and you're only looking for a small group of people. So statistically, you can say that at the error rates that they encounter in practice, 99 out of 100 hits would be false positives. And that indeed means not only that police capacity is being wasted because they need to follow up on the false leads all the time, but also that there is a high risk of innocent citizens being apprehended and maybe even arrested for crimes they didn't commit because they just look similar. And we've seen cases in the justice system where people were convicted and only years later did it turn out it was somebody else. There's also a risk of discrimination because, well, the technologies or many of the face surveillance and recognition technologies that were tested, especially those made by companies from the West, they have been shown to recognize persons of color, but also other minority groups much less well, probably because of the training data set, which was biased. And so there is a high risk of discrimination, and also, of course, following a hit, there is a high risk that the police may react differently if the person that's being reported is a member of a minority group. And so the problem with the AI Act is instead of prohibiting this and keeping Europe free of biometric mass surveillance of our public spaces, it actually sets conditions. And that means that can be used by governments as an instruction manual and actually be used to encourage them to set a signal saying that, you know, this is okay if you use face surveillance in our public space, because we have it's democratically been decided that under these conditions you can do it. And so it actually encourages this technology, which is really dangerous because on the one hand side, it is my conviction that it fundamentally violates our right to privacy, which also exists in public spaces. Where I move, who I'm with, is a private matter and not for the police to be tracked. And on the other hand, it has a chilling effect, of course. If you see these cameras everywhere, and you might have to justify your whereabouts, or even encounter police stop and frisk, then that will change your behavior. And so that's why it's a really historical tragedy that this AI Act was passed with containing an instruction manual for rolling out biometric mass surveillance. And I'm sure it won't be long before this will be used. What they're using already is the so-called exposed biometric surveillance, which is used on a case-by-case basis on video footage and recordings. But I'm afraid they won't be able to resist the real-time face surveillance for very long. We'll see. We'll be vigilant. So far, it's not being routinely used in Europe, to my knowledge, outside of experiments. But that's different for the second kind of AI-based mass surveillance, which I would call behavioral surveillance. And that is something that's being used in France, based on a law in connection with the Olympic Games. For the first time in Europe, we can see legislation authorizing this biometric mass surveillance in public spaces throughout the country. And the idea is to flag suspicious behavior or I don't know, behavior that's of interest to the police, using machine learning. So in France, they have a catalog of 7 or 8 kinds of behavior which this technology is supposed to flag. Does it work? Well, I've spoken to the French police, and they said they experimented with this in the past, but they couldn't actually give me any example where anything meaningful of what they say they are looking for, crowds, fire, panic, things like that, or even crime, was actually detected, was successfully detected. So they couldn't give me a single example of where it protected the public. We know from experiments, and actually this is being used on a local level and has been for some time in the German city of Mannheim. We know that It also comes with a lot of false positives. For example, in Mannheim, the police reports that the system can't reliably tell you approaching someone close from attacking them. So, for example, if you give somebody a kiss or you embrace them, this can be interpreted as violence and flagged to the police, even though it is, of course, quite private to be saying goodbye to someone, etc. There is also a risk that minorities could be disproportionately affected. For example, who will not be moving in the same direction, who may be sitting on the ground, which are things that may be flagged. It could be a homeless person, of course, and it is clear that the risk of being reported for behaving differently from the mass means that this entire system has an effect of encouraging people to move with the flow, not to be individual, but to behave the same as everybody else. And that's, of course, a very Chinese idea of harmony, of a calm, and I would say dead society that is no longer individual, diverse, open for protest, also for dissent, but that is encouraged to, well, above all, be a consumerist a society of citizens that are just afraid that they might be reported to the police if they behave any differently from the others. And that chilling effect is really a danger to our society, and I'm worried that with the rollout of these systems, we will actually encourage a development where citizens will no longer dare to stand out and stand up for their rights. So let's move to the third kind. Well, this is not being banned by the AI Act, just to be clear, right? So this is another kind of technology that will remain to be permitted, except if you consider fundamental rights. And this has not yet been assessed by European courts. Some French courts thought behavioral surveillance is okay, but I doubt that this would stand up to the scrutiny of the European courts, and we should have it assessed very soon, because we should keep our public spaces free of mass surveillance. Now, the third kind of biometric mass surveillance that I would like to discuss is a kind of emotion recognition. One type of this, where technology is used to recognize emotions, is a so-called video lie detector. And I know about it because the EU ran a pilot project and invested several millions in having testing at several borders, a system where travelers to Europe would have to undergo, in front of their smartphones, questioning by a virtual border guard. They would have to answer questions of the kind that you might encounter in the airport: have you packed your luggage, etc. And then the developers of some software called Silent Talker, a British software, promise that they can tell from the behavior and the face of the person replying to these questions in front of their smartphone cameras. They could tell whether the person is lying or telling the truth. Well, that of course raises, first of all, the question, does it work? I would say it is really a voodoo science. So independent scientists say there is no way that facial movements or microexpressions could reliably tell whether someone is telling the truth or not. It'd probably much closer be to the chance of random experiment, whether this assessment is correct or not. The vendors of this technology claim that they have run experiments, but in fact it's experiments of about 40 people. Many times these were students whose data was used to train the system in the first place. The technology is closed source, proprietary, has never been independently tested. And what I also find outrageous is even though the EU invested millions in testing this technology, it is still totally inaccessible to the public. So this is commercial property, intellectual property, and remains protected, even though so much public money has flown into it. So I've actually taken to the European Court of Justice to access at least the documentation in connection with this trial. And I've been able to get hold of most parts of the ethics review, of the legal review. Is this actually compliant with European rights? And the result is no, all of which they tried to hide from us. I found out that in the course of this pilot, of this project, of this research and development project, they actually actively lobby decision makers, including politicians, to change the rules to allow for the deployment of these systems. And clearly, in my eyes, this is an abuse of public money for lobbying, which is scandalous. But still, despite all public scrutiny and criticism, the EU followed up, and in another research project called Trespass, again, so-called deception detection technology was tested. And in fact, the AI Act only classifies it as high-risk technology, but that doesn't at all mean that it's prohibited. It only has some procedural requirements that need to be met to deploy it. So again, this is something that's permitted, but something that's really dangerous to society, in my opinion, because think of all the ways in which this could be used. The borders are just one idea, but governments could use it for all kinds of appointments. When you apply for benefits, even banks could use it when you apply for a loan, insurance companies when you apply for compensation. So you'll be labeled a liar based on just false predictions by this technology. In fact, a journalist has tested the system and answered 16 questions truthfully. The system said for 4 of them that she lied. So that's an error rate so scary that you would never want to see this kind of technology being used. But we know that China is using it on the Uyghur minority already. So this is really dystopian tech. And let me go into a last example, which is not about biometrics, but about our communications, about our private messages, photos, videos that we might share with our families and friends. And this is about chat control, which was mentioned in the introduction. So the chat control proposal is unique worldwide in that it would force the providers of communication services, so email, be it messenger services, Signal, WhatsApp, you name it, be it chat services, so any app with a chat function, including games, dating apps, whatever, would be forced to scan your private messages for suspicious content, and that is being proposed in the name of protecting children against child sexual abuse. Now, this proposal also encompasses the use of machine learning, because the idea is not only to look for images and videos that have been classified previously, and in fact, this method of chat control is already being used voluntarily, but police tell us that up to 80 or 90% of the photos that are being reported, even though previously classified, are not criminally relevant, because a person received these without intent, because they were exchanged consensually, because they are not illegal under our law and they have been inserted in the database in the US. So there are many reasons why even flags of known materials are many times criminally irrelevant. And in fact, many times young people and minors themselves are hit by criminal investigations because of this voluntary chat control, which is currently being used by large US companies, most of all by Meta on its Facebook Messenger, which is of course not yet end-to-end encrypted. They've announced to do so, and I'm suing them to do so. So let's hope that this will come later this year. But they are not only proposing to look to force providers, and that would include European providers that are not using this mass surveillance so far. They're not only proposing to force providers to look for material that's already referenced using hashes, they're also proposing to use machine learning technology to decide whether an unknown image or video matches some kind of patterns that might contain a child sexual abuse material. And these kind of algorithms would be trained with actual material, but in fact, they are again totally closed source proprietary. Never independent testing has been possible on their accuracy. The legislative proposal actually does not contain any requirements as of accuracy. Not 90%, not 99, not 99.9%, but it doesn't say anything about the accuracy that these technologies would need to have. And so what's the risk of this? Of course, it will flag consensual sexting that might take place during teenagers. Of course, the technology can't reliably tell the age of the persons involved. So young adults could see their intimate images and videos being exposed to moderators somewhere in the world, to officials in whose hand this kind of intimate material, family images, beach photos, you name it, do not belong and where they are not safe. Also, certain persons have a right to handle this material. Doctors. So a man has had his accounts cancelled because he sent a picture of his son's genitals to a doctor. By the way, they refused to reinstate him. Lawyers have a need to handle this. The police need to handle this kind of material, which is why the latest chat control proposal says that security services and the military would be exempt from this chat control. So they understand very well how error-prone this is, and yet they are pursuing these plans. If you look up my accounts, you can read about the latest developments and proposal on this. And I think this would destroy the digital privacy of correspondence, and also it would destroy secure end-to-end encryption, because in order to be able to scan, these messenger apps would have to scan on device, so-called client-side scanning. And this would open up our messages for surveillance for all kinds of other purposes. And it also inserts new insecurities into these apps that could be exploited by intelligence services or criminals. So this is a threat to our communication safety and to our privacy, of course. Lawyers, including the Council's own legal service, say this most likely violates fundamental rights and wouldn't stand in court, but governments are still pursuing it regardless. And so my point is that all this technology that I have presented today has the potential for being abused to build a high-tech surveillance state. And remember that in Europe, we have authoritarian governments too, and they are easily tempted to use technology to abuse it for other purposes. Think of Orban criminalizing immigration and considering it as criminal activities. Think of many governments abusing spyware. In the course of the Pegasus scandal, we have investigated that. The these many governments or intelligence services abused this kind of spyware to spy on journalists, on the opposition, on opposition figures, on lawyers. So this is prone to abuse in Europe too. Don't make a mistake about it. And I think the developments that I have shown, you know, the AI Act not banning these practices, but rather encouraging them, the chat control proposal actively promoting a kind of mass surveillance that is unheard of in the free world, show that we are moving step by step towards it. But on the other hand, to give a message of hope, I don't think it's unstoppable, because if it was unstoppable, they wouldn't be fighting for it so hard. They wouldn't be fighting our opposition to it so hard. And so I think there is a lot we can do about it. In fact, in the European Parliament, where I co-negotiated our position on the chat control proposal, we totally rewrote the proposal. We removed chat control, we protected end-to-end encryption. We instead proposed to require security by design for messaging services and apps, for instance, to ask the user before their profile is made public, to ask the user, do they really want to receive messages or photos from somebody before sharing them, to ask them for confirmation before they send nudity or phone numbers. So this is the kind of technology that could protect against child grooming and child sexual abuse or exploitation, and which would be much more effective, to my conviction, than creating a flood of mostly false reports. And so I want to conclude with a message of hope and a message of encouragement, and encouraging you that a vibrant civil society, and we've seen that in the case of biometric mass surveillance, we've seen a campaign, we've seen a European Citizens Initiative, and in the case of chat control, we've seen protests from throughout civil society, science, industry even, that this can make a difference. And so keep up fighting for our rights, for our privacy, and for our civil liberties, because they are worth defending.
I forgot to mute again, but now it should be fine. So, thank you, Patrick, for your insight and your message of hope. And halfway during your talk, I got the idea that you are preaching for the choir. But then I also thought that if you are familiar with what happens in churches, is that what the choir does is singing, and actually that's not so far away from preaching, from sending out the message in a way that sticks. So thank you for helping us all to sing. We have lots of time for questions. So I'll open the floor for questions, and Myron here has a microphone. We will bring that to you if you have a question, and then I will repeat the question so that also the people online can hear. Questions, please. Yes, there's one there.
Yeah, I was thinking, considering that there's apparently no standards for security for the detection machinery of the CSAT, are there any controls able to remarks that are going on, say, infrastructure?
Okay, let me try to repeat that. The question is, there are no standards for accuracy, and the question is, what can be done about that? Maybe that's a bit too short.
Yeah, what if you can implement the check that it's okay to hire very non-audited machinery and that this always return this is that? You just straight up like a wiretap, send 100% of everyone's messages through the same.
So one way to solve it is with wiretaps, and then you break security. So are there other ways to solve this? This is more or less your question? Patrick, did you get the question?
Yes, I did. Look, I'm not aware of any standards on accuracy of these technologies, but I think there should be. I think if you use some kind of system that that out of the hits that it reports and the people it accuses, that it should have a very high accuracy, and it should be more like 99 true positives and 1 false than the other way around. I once traveled to the United States because they are using, when you enter the country, they are using a technology already which is being rolled out in Europe, and that is a kind of automated risk evaluation. So is the traveler a risk? And that is judged based on patterns. And what they do is they analyze previous, when terrorists or I don't know, criminals previously entered the countries, they will look at their data and see, can we create a pattern to prevent this happening in the future? And I asked them, well, do you also check how many innocent citizens this pattern matches? And they said, yes, they do look into that, but they don't actually have any threshold or any minimum accuracy for this. So it could be that this pattern incriminates a great number of travelers and will only rarely actually reveal somebody who is an actual risk to their security. And so it's a great problem that there are no accuracy standards at all. But I think that quite apart from the accuracy, even if these systems worked normally without errors, I don't think that mass surveillance is acceptable. I don't think that the entire society and any citizen should be placed under this kind of surveillance and suspicion. I think that the way to go under the rule of law is really targeted investigation against persons who have who are connected to criminal activity, and not just monitoring them because they could be.
Does this answer your question? Yes? Okay, thank you. Question. We have lots of time.
So let's assume I'm a company that create one of those information market solutions, and when somebody like you, for example, comes and says, well, it doesn't work, and I think we've seen that the default answer is like, yeah, we just need more data, so let's do more of it. How do you argue for it? How do you solve this hard situation?
So did you hear the question, Patrick?
If you could repeat it for me, please.
Yeah, so actually I find it hard to repeat it, and that's also because I didn't see who was talking.
Should I try again? So
I'm very sorry, but maybe the best thing to do is that you come here and ask your question here. If you don't mind.
I don't mind.
It's because the microphone doesn't connect to the online connection. So, and it's really very hard for me to grasp the question and then repeat it. Thank you.
Okay. Hi. My question is if I'm my question is if I'm a vendor of such software, my default argument will always be, oh yeah, I just need more data. So give me more money, let's do more of this. How do you counter that argument, and how successful is this, also considering maybe the last 10 years where we've seen this over and over again?
Thank you.
Yes, that's a very good point. You know, with surveillance legislation and methods, they will argue for, say, well, if we use more of this, it'll work even better. If it doesn't work, then they will say, well, we need more of this to make it work. So, indeed, it's a dangerous argument to go into the accuracy rates under which this might be acceptable. I don't think there's any accuracy rate to make mass surveillance acceptable. And that's why we use more principled arguments like chilling effects, etc. But I also don't agree to those who say, let's not discuss the accuracy rates at all, because that's not the point of it. I think it's definitely part of the discussion to explain to the public what does it mean in practice. What could it mean to you if these systems are being used and result in you being reported as an innocent citizen? In fact, in some cases, technologies have been so inaccurate that the police themselves decided to stop using them. So at one point, the United States experimented with something like similar to eye border control, to the video lie detector. They called it differently, but after about 2 years, they stopped using it. And they don't say publicly why that was. But I mean, knowing the technology, I can only assume that the system just randomly reported any people as liars and was totally useless. And in fact, even during the trials in European borders, the journalist who was flagged as a potential liar by the system was still allowed to enter the country without any questioning. So the border guard themselves didn't seem to think it very, very helpful. I hope that kind of answers your question.
Yes, please. The person who asked the question is very happy with your answer. So we can have one more question. Yes, please.
Should I go there?
Yes.
I'll go and say.
Please go here. Yeah, Henk. Hi. Hey.
Thanks, Patrick, for your talk. This is Daan Koeman. I was supposed to talk about this similar subject later today, but I think I should reconsider my topic. But let's just see. I have one question for you, which is one aspect that you didn't discuss was the issue of age verification, which is also very important in the context of detecting CSAM because it determines whether something is child pornography or not. Now, there's a question of whether there is suitable technology to do that. From a European perspective, you could argue that the new eID wallet could serve that purpose. Is this one of the applications where the use of the EID wallet is foreseen for future age verification? And in general, what is your view of using the EID wallet as a gatekeeper, a barrier for verifying all kinds of attributes of age for accessing services like messaging or social networks or any other service?
Excellent question. You won't be surprised to hear that I'm a fierce opponent of this kind of thinking of age verification. What we've tried to make sure when drawing up the Parliament's alternative version of protecting children online was that all of the security measures that we propose would apply regardless of your age and would work also for adults and children and teenagers alike, that they would empower the user and place them in a situation of control rather than controlling them and determining what they can do and what they can't. When it comes to the idea of age verification, I think that it comes with the great risk that you will no longer be able to use the internet, digital services, and communication services anonymously, because for most methods of age verification that are currently being used, you will either have to present your face or your ID. And no matter what they promise, I think it is very likely that you will leave traces of this age verification process that will, at least for law enforcement authorities, allow to trace your identity. And that means that that affects whistleblowers, for instance, who would no longer be able to communicate anonymously if communication services were required to verify the age. And that's also part of the chat control proposal, requiring all communication services to verify your age. So that's a threat to the right to anonymity, which keeps us safe online, protects us against stalking, against data theft, identity theft, etc. And that's why it's really dangerous. And on the other hand, if there was really a method that was anonymous to use, zero knowledge proof, etc., what's being discussed, it would just be so easy to hand over the token, to hand over the account details, to hand over the device to children and teenagers. So if it's really privacy friendly, it will no longer meet the purpose because it can be circumvented so easily. And that's why I think that online safety is a challenge that cannot be solved technologically. I'm sure they would want to use the EID for this purpose, but it comes with all of the risks that I have named. And many more, which is why I've opposed the final draft of it. But it's certainly not the solution to these issues. In fact, we have commissioned a poll where more than 8,000 teenagers throughout Europe were asked, a representative poll, and the majority said if any kind of age verification were imposed, they would find an adult to register their services or their devices. So they would be able to easily circumvent it. And I think we just need to live with the fact that our teenagers have access to material which is not suitable to them. I don't think we can technologically prevent them from this. It's actually a matter of education. We need them to learn how to safely and securely deal with the availability of this kind of stuff. It's a matter of educating them, which I think also makes sense, because otherwise, the day you turn 18, all of a sudden you would be confronted with all of this stuff and totally dive into it. And this is much more unhealthy than having a process of learning how to responsibly deal with such material.
Okay, we also have to do all this switching. So thanks again, Patrick, for your message of concern and hope, and keep up the good work. And I'll ask the audience now to also give thanks to Patrick loud enough so that he can hear it through this microphone.